not getting it. Like, that's not what it is. It doesn't have to be big and expensive.
Yeah.
It's just it can be something as small as bending conduit, but it's bending it with such attention to detail and care for the outcome. That's where the fine comes in.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. You're listening to Fine Home Building staffers Brian Pontalillo, Matt Milham, and me, Justin Fink.
Hey.
Good morning.
Gentlemen. First, let me remind you of our email address, fhbpodcast@taunton.com, where you can send us your questions and topics for discussion. We've been getting, I was thinking about this morning. As the show grows, the questions seem to get more and more complicated. So now it's like, oh man, if we want to answer this, we're going to have to do a lot of research to figure out the answer.
Easy ones, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easy ones. We still get some easy ones mixed in there, or some that are less. It's tough because some of them are so specific to a certain example, which is great time to time. Others are broad talking points. So it's funny to see it happening. But anyway, another reminder, this is our last show before we head to the Remodeling show in Nashville, Tennessee, where in addition to our usual Friday podcast, which will still be up, we'll also be doing live podcasts that Jeff will be feverishly releasing on a fast-paced schedule. Jeff, I think we're doing 4 or 5? 5. Lastly, next week we're going to have special guest Michael Pekovich.
Not next week.
Yeah, the next show that they had.
You just said this was the last one before the remodeling show.
Right. The last. This is the last one of the regular. Next week, Brian, the next episode is going to have Mike. That's all you need to know.
I don't know what's happening with the remodeling show then.
The remodeling show are extras.
Oh, they're going to just come when they're...
Yeah. So you will hear those next, but next week we're going to... So you're right. It's not the next show, but next regular show.
You're going to put those up as soon as you record them.
That's it.
Got it.
So you're right.
Almost live.
You were right to call me out on it.
Almost live.
Let me try to be more clear. This is the last regular Friday show before our special shows from Nashville.
Justin, if we don't call each other...
But the next Friday show, we'll have Mike Pekovich.
Yes. If we don't call each other on our mistakes, we got nothing around here.
I know. That's all we do. Anyway, Mike is the creative director at our sister publication, Fine. Creative director? Is that? I think that's what his title is.
Yeah, I believe so.
He's like the Uber art director at our sister publication, Fine Woodworking. He's going to come on so we can chat about woodworking, topics that kind of cross over into home building, and share some of his really deep knowledge about, building efficiency and accuracy and sharpening and more. He's a truly fantastic human, and you do not want to miss that episode. It's going to be good.
I would go so far as to say that having the opportunity to watch Mike Pekovich work in my time here at Taunton has been one of the highlights. Yeah, it's like you feel like you're in kind of like a meditative state almost, just learning from him. He's so calm and he's so purposeful in his actions. And sure, there's a lot of it's funny too because he's such a master of his craft, but he doesn't know much about home building. But there are some things. I listen to both shows because I really enjoy furniture making and woodworking in general. So I listen to Shop Talk Live, which is the Fine Woodworking podcast, also produced by Jeff Rose. He's a man of many talents. Yes. Well, one talent, but many shows. And so I can hear some of the things that they talk about in that show, and I understand the application to our world. Maybe they might not even, but so I'm hoping to put together some questions and some talking points that we can sort of pass along some of what Mike knows in his world and see how it applies to our world, particularly, hand tools and getting extremely sharp and very accurate results from, finished carpenters and cabinet makers and crossover woodworkers are going to enjoy that conversation. So stay tuned for that. What else? Matt's just back from his first solo photo shoot for the magazine. Yeah. California. Mm-hmm. Yeah, tired. Yeah, you did like a Justin Fink turnaround on this trip, there and back in 2 days. Yeah.
Yeah. Flew out Sunday, flew back yesterday. So 2 full days of shooting.
Yeah.
And yeah, the author, CJ Nielsen, fantastic dude. Really knowledgeable. And
he's on Instagram. I think it's on CNC Electric.
yeah, CNC Electric.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, he gave me some stickers I got to give you guys when I dig them out. I don't know where I put them. I saw them this morning.
The sticker swab, it's a real thing on that Instagram community.
Yeah. But yeah, he's just really, besides just being really knowledgeable, like his work is so neat. Like he takes a lot of extra time to make sure that everything just looks nice. And like he was even joking, he's like, man, I got to stop being so OCD, because he's rearranging, just like pushing wires around like millimeters pretty much to make sure that it looks like absolutely perfect. And it does look nice when it's done. But it's not like cabinetry or anything, and you're never going to see most of this stuff. Like it's in a box, and then it's
but how
gone.
much of it was because you had a camera pointed at him, and how much of it is?
That's a good question. I don't know. I get the impression that he's probably just that way in general. I mean, you see his stuff up on Instagram too, and I mean, he's just he really takes a lot of care. I mean, it's a craft to him. I think he kind of
It's a craft for sure.
Yeah. It's a craft, but I mean, he takes it to a level where, probably your average electrician is, happy to get the job done. They get it done as quickly as possible. He'll take some extra steps, maybe that the average guy wouldn't do, just to do it right in his mind. Like, he has an idea of what right looks like, and he knows what cutting corners looks like, and, he just doesn't want to cut any corners.
Yeah. It's kind of remarkable when you see electrical work that's done neatly, and it's also super helpful when you're looking at it. And if you open up a panel, for example, and it's just a bird's nest, it's a lot harder to figure out what's what.
The term is rat's nest, Brian.
Bird's nest works, right?
I guess.
Yeah, why not?
You just like birds better than rats. But we won't go. We don't need to go there. If everything's neatly arranged, if all the cable and wire are pushed into the corners and then run down neatly to their respective breakers and bars, it's like you can quickly get to work.
Right. There is definitely a function. I mean, there's an inherent advantage to being super neat. It makes it really easy to trace things, really easy to understand where everything's going. So it's not completely just for the sake of being fussy.
Yeah.
And if you look, and we have some pictures from Matt's shoot that you can go check out at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Got a lot of names here. Finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can see some of the shots from the shoot.
Is that one behind you?
I can't look behind me.
Yeah.
Not allowed to. But probably. But I mean, look at that. It's like it almost looks like the panel is empty. It's so the wires are tucked so tightly off to one side that it may as well not have anything in it.
That's a sub-panel for a garage, or
it's in a house.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a sub-panel for a house.
So we're gonna basically Matt went out there to get working with metal conduit.
Yep.
And I don't know how we're gonna call the other one. I guess just wiring a panel, right?
Yeah.
Should be pretty cool stuff.
I would like to know how to run cable. Whenever I see an electrician's work, they seem to be able to run the cable and run it flat, like let's say along,
they never twist
a joist, and they keep it so flat and tight. Mine always has twists and
how does he pull it really tight and flat? Does he staple one section and then yank on it, like really tug it flat?
We didn't.
And does he go staple to staple, or does he
do
hit
the whole
one
run
end
and then go back?
Go all the way to the other end and then do the middle?
Well, he was using these like plastic hanger things that it just kind of like
little
goes
sand
onto.
clips.
Yeah, these clips, and they just made everything look really neat. He didn't use any staples when I was there. I don't know if that is something he always does, or if it's just for an application like this. But we weren't doing any really long runs of wire.
Yeah.
See, that's I think there's something to be said. I think it's when you're pulling the wire,
the way
pulling
it's
the cable,
unspooling.
Yeah. But see, that's why when I did the conduit in my garage, and I know Matt just shot some conduit with CJ, the conduit makes it look like you're really neat and tidy and nice. As long as you get those lines nice and straight, the wires inside can be twisted, and they can be a rat infested bird nest. Doesn't matter.
I'm glad I like your comment. Matt said he treats it like it's almost like craft, and you said it is a craft.
Oh, for sure.
And because I was I was on a photo shoot last week and watching some guys install a rooftop photovoltaic system, and what I came away with from that was this crew is a company called Namaste Solar in Denver, Colorado.
So perfect for Brian.
Yeah. And what I came away from that crew was how they really treated the work like craft in themselves and, approached it as craftsmen, far beyond like just, locking everything into this system of feet and racking and all that kind of stuff, which is basically, fastening different types of bolts. But they took the time to square things and, make sure that the array followed the right line, the ridge instead of the shingles, and pulled lines to make sure the two rows of panels were actually, perfectly in plane with each other. And it took what, again, this is an out of the box system that anyone who's seen parts and pieces of a home before would quickly go, I got it, I can put that together. But they sort of took that extra step and added the craft into this installation. It was really pretty awesome to see.
And I think that's, to me, the best explanation of what we do. That's where the fine in fine home building is supposed to is the best definition I've heard of it. It's not. We often get people like, oh, well, you should come take some. You should see this remodel we're working on. It's a $500,000 job, and it's 8,000 square foot addition and all this stuff. And it's like, you're not getting it. Like, that's not what it is. It doesn't have to be big and expensive.
Yeah.
It's just it can be something as small as bending conduit, but it's bending it with such attention to detail and care for the outcome. That's where the fine comes in.
Yeah. And then there's that opposite comment, right? Vinyl doesn't belong on a fine home.
Right.
And, well, our response to that would be, but it goes on homes, and here's the way to do it.
Right. It's not it's not about
finally
sticking your nose out. It's something. It's about doing it if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Because your client's asking, here's how to do it the right way.
Here's how to do it right.
Yeah. And you should have as much care about doing that the right way as you do about the most expensive siding the right way. That's all it's about. So tell everybody that.
Glad we cleared that up today.
Unintentionally. We're planning on going there. It happens, though. Y'all guys want to do some questions?
Sure.
We actually got a question from Andy Moore, who's one of our brand ambassadors. And actually, Andy's going to be with us in Nashville. So
cool.
He wrote, with flooring trends coming and going faster than ever, what would you consider the most timeless hardwood flooring, if there is such a thing? I love it. Simple question.
Yeah,
but
let's complicate the answer.
Let's complicate the answer. And I can complicate it. I was able to pull up a chart from an article. I think you worked on this, Brian. I think this is with Anatole.
I did not work on
flooring.
I know the story. Yeah.
It was in one of your issues.
Yeah.
So basically what this chart, which has an excellent headline of what's hot under your heels. Come on. That's great. Who wrote that?
Must have been Anatole.
Yeah. Basically, red oak and white oak are the two most popular. And my first knee-jerk reaction to this question was, well, the most timeless is probably red oak. But then because that seems like people are still installing it now. And if you go back to a house in the 40s and 50s, they were installing it then. And it never really seems to have changed much. Like, it's still as popular now as it was back. Oh, I don't know if that's true, but it hasn't become dated, But then you get into the regionality thing, and it's hard to answer the question from that, because certain areas of the country it's going to be pine probably.
Right, wide pine floors in New England. You're just going to go. That's comfortable. That's home. That's we've seen hundreds. We've each been in hundreds of houses. If you grew up around here that have had that, I think I've seen. I agree though. And it's on the top of that list. But red oak strip flooring is like I've seen that everywhere I've gone around the whole country.
Yeah.
So that's certainly
because it's inexpensive, widely available, and super durable.
Yeah.
And I threw a photo up there. I don't know if we've go to the next one, Jeff. Yeah, that. I mean, that's red oak. If you finish it appropriately, can look really good.
Yeah, and you'll find that floor in you'll find it in bungalows from the 1920s. You'll find it in ranches from the 1950s. You're going to find it in 80s developments. You're going to find that flooring everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, this was the photo that we're showing on the screen here is from a shoot I did in Pennsylvania. I think I was in.
It's a nice shot, Mr. Frank.
Well, thank you. And this was a really, working class house.
Was that the UV cured flooring?
No.
Oh.
No, this was the refinish your hardwood floor story.
Oh, right.
This is the same shoot where the guy was doing the oil-based stain on the floor. But this might have been when you were gone. Maybe that's why I don't remember it. Brian's sabbatical that he took for a while there. The guys were putting on the stain, but they didn't. You know what it's like when you're on a shoot. You're trying to be safety conscious. Like, all right, do you have safety glasses? Cool. You need to put them on for this shot. Or do you have rubber gloves? So it comes time to stain. Not only were they not wearing gloves, they didn't have any. Never had any. And there was nowhere nearby to go buy some. So I was like, all right, the guy's dipping his whole hand into the can of stain. And then it comes, when you get back to the office, you're kind of torn. It's one of those things like, do we fess up to this? And do we just say, look, sometimes this is what happens, and then take all of the words necessary on the page to explain your way out of it? Or do you just rely on the post-production department here at the company and just say, can you Photoshop some gloves on these hands? And it's a weird thing to have to fess up to sometimes, but sometimes changing reality is the fastest way to avoid wasting space in the article to explain things that really shouldn't have to be explained. Does that make any sense?
Well, it does. I mean, we
try not to change reality
for as long as I've been here, right? Like certain things, we have this issue when it comes to safety gear. We have this issue when it comes to codes.
Yep.
Stair rails. I mean, how many letters have we gotten about deadly stair rails because
I got one in the
balusters were
from the
horizontal
last issue
or something
from that bungalow story.
Oh yeah,
the handrail starts in the second tread instead of the first. It has nothing to do with the story. It was in one shot.
Yeah,
the exterior shot, front entry, concrete stairs.
Yeah,
the guy pointed out the stair rail was attached to the wrong tread. I was like, wow.
Yeah,
that's not what the story's about.
I kind of think that that there's this built-in caveat to everything we publish. That is that like this is number one. When it comes to codes, you're subject to the codes in your area. And this house either was in an area without codes or passed inspection somewhere.
Right.
And when it comes to safety, that it's like this is the level of safety that this author was comfortable with. And I mean, yes, sometimes it seems irresponsible to show poor practices, but at the same time, the author felt comfortable with it. That's what he took, and maybe a couple of caveats.
Right.
To sort of explain that, but yeah, without going to the depth of.
Well, but the thing is with that, like you don't want to accidentally give the impression to readers that it's okay to not wear gloves with this. So, and then to take all the space required to say that, it's like, or just put gloves on them. And then
I guess when it's that
thing.
simple. Sometimes it's not that simple,
it's
though.
Not,
sometimes it's like, okay, you are installing a mud sill over a foundation with a basement.
Yes.
You're supposed to have fall protection.
Right, exactly.
So are we going to go to that length to put some harness on these guys or put up a rail? I mean, and is that realistic? Would we ever expect that any of the builders out there that are reading our magazine are putting up fall protection when they put the plate on a mud sill over an 8-foot basement?
Right, and a lot of it becomes really reactionary. And I remember having this conversation with Rob, who's obviously not here today, but he saw a photo that was floating around the internet of a fiber angle grinder disc that exploded in use and like embedded in the guy's head or something. And then Rob made a declaration that if we're ever going to show a photo of an angle grinder in use, the guy had to be wearing a full face mask. And it was like, what? Like, because he decided that that's what he felt like. He was so shaken up by that photo that he felt like it'd be irresponsible for us to show it any other way. And it hasn't come up yet, but it's just like it's easy to get swept up in it.
Yeah, and I get Rob's concern. We could find the guy who, broke both legs falling off the first rung of a ladder.
Right.
We could find, we could find everything if we looked hard enough.
We really took this thing tangential.
We did. Let's get back to,
back
more
to
to say about hardwood flooring.
Before we go back to flooring, in the last issue, I wrote about this Harbor Freight pull saw, this little $7, $8 Japanese style flush cutting saw. So last night, I open up my phone, I go onto Instagram, and I open it like it's a flip phone. I wish it was a flip phone. So I go onto Instagram and I see that I'm tagged in something, and this guy writes, so on a tip from Mr. J. Fink, I went to Harbor Freight and I bought this little pull saw, and I've been using it for some work on my shed. And he's like, turns out it also is really great at cutting skin and not so bad at bone. And then he had this photo of this horrendous, I think it was 3 internal stitches and 9 on the outside of the skin. And I had this moment of like, oh my God, like I feel like I'm somehow responsible. Like, sorry that you hurt yourself with a tool that I recommended people should look at. I know it has nothing to do with me, but it was a weird thing to be tied to.
Yeah.
If you got instruction, I mean, you should include instructions. Once it hits your hand, stop pulling.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sharp, and he had it across his knuckle, and I've cut myself similarly in a different spot in the hand.
Yeah.
You know, it jumps out of the cut or whatever, and does damage really quick.
Yeah, I just like touched my Dozuki saw, I think, to my hand a couple times cutting dovetails, and it cuts real fast.
Look at you cutting dovetails.
Yeah. That was back in school. Making cabinets, little cabinets.
Wow.
Boxes.
Oh, okay. Back to hardwood flooring.
Yeah.
So you have something to say about this, Brian?
I mean, the timeless thing is always an interesting sort of twist on things, right? Because they're not asking about durability or
what do we like the best,
price, or what do we like the best. You know, one of the newer trends in hardwood floors is sort of these more stripy kind of grains.
Striated,
Striated, and almost like from one board to another, very, great variation in color. And to me, that someone may like that and choose to install it, and it may be of a species that is durable and all of that. And if they can afford it, fine. To me, that is the kind of thing that we end up looking at in a few years and going, what were we thinking with that trend?
Yeah, I don't like it now.
Yeah, I don't either. But I wonder if bamboo's going to. Some of the bamboo flooring is that. Some of it is not.
Some of it's not, yeah.
But I've installed a bunch of bamboo, and we had it in the Pro Home last year because it's a really inexpensive, highly durable solution. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like the way it looks. I didn't like installing it. I found the edges to be kind of fragile, and the splinters you can get from it are just brutal. They're like Doug Fir on steroid splinters,
You know what other flooring, this is a little tangential to hardwood, I guess bamboo is too, but the flooring that I'd like to hear about some feedback on is all the cork that people were installing like 6-7 years ago. It was sort of this mad dash put in cork, and I haven't heard anything about it since. And I've seen a couple of floors that didn't look so great.
So the yoga studio I go to has full cork floors, and they're not just the ones I've installed, and I've done a couple of cork floors. They were tiles or like planks, like wide planks, maybe like, 18 inches wide and 3 feet long or something. And they had the MDF base, and they would kind of snap lock together. And you would end up, if you got it like wet or the edges were fragile.
They just swell a little bit, and that's what I've seen.
But at the studio, this is the reason why I'm bringing it up, is they finished the cork. Like, it looks like they put a regular, maybe it is just regular polyurethane top coat over it. And so there are you can still see, I think they use tiles, more like 12 by 12 or 18 by 18, but it's not, there's not an exposed edge. You can still sort of sometimes see the telegraphed edge, but it's a continuous finish over the surface. And it looks like it's holding up dynamite. Granted, that when you're in a yoga studio, nobody's wearing shoes.
Right.
But, there's definitely a lot of moisture happening, a lot of hot classes where people are dumping water onto it, and mats that are sitting there and holding that water directly against the floor. So, I don't know. It's interesting you bring it up because I was just thinking about it on Monday.
Yeah.
I wonder about
I've
this.
seen a couple that I thought weren't wearing well, but that's just a couple.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get some feedback from some people who had lived with them for a while.
Didn't you have it in the yoga studio you used to manage? Wasn't that in the entryway? That wasn't cork? No. Oh, okay. I think it can be cool, especially when you get to that. I had it in my kitchen once when I had a condo, and I cut it into tiles, and then I stained some of the tiles a slightly browner version and kept the other ones natural and glued them down. And it was nice, except you had the seams.
I like the look, and it's got a nice feel.
Yeah.
Under your feet. So.
Plus, it's super. Look at us. We have cork pads right here.
Yeah, cork.
Yeah. Cork. Get some. I don't know how to answer this question. I will.
The hardwood flooring question?
Yes. Yeah.
So we haven't answered it?
No, I mean, because it's the timeless thing that makes it hard to answer.
But we agreed on the red oak.
But
maybe that's the answer.
Well, I also wanted to share this one photo from Rafe Churchill's project.
Okay.
The one with the southern pine flooring, with that stairway shot with the foyer. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing about this photo that I don't love.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to put that up on the blog page,
yeah,
right?
No, this should be, if you don't come to the website just to see this photo,
Rafe
I don't even know why we're having this podcast then.
I know. I was on his website the other day to see if he had something that I was looking for, and every house.
Yeah. Every house is dynamite.
Dynamite. He's so good. And you know what's really neat in this place? Those were relatively affordable floors. You put them downstairs, you put them upstairs. Downstairs, you finished them with this
Bona Natural.
Bona Natural, which, as you can see in the photo, the wood just really looks very natural.
Yep.
And then upstairs, he painted them with like a whitewash, and they look dynamite up there too.
Yeah. So the Bona Natural, I've worked with Bona Poly a couple of times. Actually, it was the same finish, same product line they used in that other shot we just showed of the red oak. That stuff is so awesome to work with. I used it. They used it on that project for the floor, and I was there to see the whole thing. And then I used it on a bar top project. It just lays down so smooth, like no bubbles. It's so easy to work with. It's great. Super durable. I think they use it on basketball courts. But anyway, the Bona Natural finish, or natural, it has an E in the end. I don't know how to say it, but
go with natural.
Natural.
Class it up a little bit.
Bona Naturale is what I guess Rafe put it as the closest you can get to the floor looking like it has no finish on it, which is awesome. It's so dramatic in this shot, and it makes me want to just reproduce it with that nice. I actually thought that when I went to grab this photo, in my head I remembered it as being ash flooring. But then when I actually read it, I was like, oh, this is Southern Pine. So
I got to interview Rafe in that house.
Yeah.
In that room with the built-ins around the fireplace.
Did we do a video of that interview, or is it just
it's just when I interviewed him for the article, and it was one of those spaces that I just felt like I never needed to leave.
That was that room that they put all the insulation on the outside, right? And so didn't he have one room? It was like it had a wood stove, and the walls were open.
That's the entryway, sort of the mud room of the house. Yeah, we were sitting. I was in there too, of course. That's how I entered. But we were sitting in the living room. Yeah, and it was just like I remember, like I wasn't even really paying attention. I couldn't. I was like so taken by the way the space felt. I was like asking him questions, and then I was like getting absorbed in this just such a comfortable.
We got to get more stuff
place.
from him.
Yeah,
do something about that. All right, next question, since we didn't really answer that one. Chris writes, gentlemen and Justin. I don't know what that means. Thank you, Chris. First off, love the podcast and all the awesome content that comes with it. I have a question regarding installing head flashing on new windows and doors into existing stuccoed walls. Has anyone found a good method of applying headlap metal flashing to the tops of new windows or doors that doesn't involve chipping away and repatching stucco afterwards? I've been fortunate enough that all the instances I've run into for doing this so far have required other major areas of patching, and chipping away a little extra was an acceptable solution. However, at some point, I'm not going to be lucky anymore. I'm wondering if cutting a slot in the stucco at the top of the window or door trim and inserting head flashing with the upstand leg trimmed off would be sufficient. I think that's something that we've all been tempted by as a solution, not just to the stucco thing, but if it was adhered into the slot and sealed with a polyurethane caulking. He's wondering if he just needs to suck it up and commit to patching the stucco. As a side note that this is relevant, he lives on Vancouver Island, so he said they get gallons upon gallons of rain in the winter. I don't know much about stucco. Stucco is a major blind spot in my knowledge. In fact, we don't really cover it in the magazine too often, and we're trying to turn that around. But one guy that does work with stucco a lot is Matt Reisinger out in Texas. And so I shot him a note and I asked him if he had any thoughts about this. And he said, unfortunately, there's no easy way to install a head flash on stucco without busting it out. We typically assume removal of 1 foot around every window to be replaced in a stucco opening. That allows us to flash correctly, install a head flash correctly, and integrate as best as possible with the existing weather barrier. One trick we learned is not to cut with an angle grinder. Instead, bust the stucco with a hammer so the lath is intact and can be folded back. I've also found fluid-applied WRBs helpful in integrating existing WRB to the new one and the flashings. So I thought that was really interesting. It's a lot of people will try to kind of say, let's measure 1 foot on all sides of the window, take an angle grinder and make a cut, and then break out the stucco that between the cut and the window. But if you cut through the metal lath, then you have to, I guess, add more metal lath and somehow bridge that gap between the new and the old. So by hitting it with a hammer, you can just break off the stucco but leave the metal.
Yeah.
Then peel it back.
Because you're going to have a cold joint there anyway with the new stucco going on.
Right.
And
cold joint being concrete that's cured or set up, and then you're trying to blend new concrete to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, I'm not sure what the technical definition is, but it technically can't integrate.
Won't bond, right?
It won't bond to the other concrete.
Yeah.
And they worry about that with foundations too. Like if you have a concrete truck that you wait too long between the first truck and the second truck, you can end up with a cold joint.
Yeah,
where it doesn't bond right.
Right, yeah. If you're like laying a slab and you get like halfway done and you come back the next day, like you're gonna have a cold joint there. So you have to take some sort of steps to avoid that. And leaving the lath there is one way to kind of help keep that together.
You're gonna have the cold joint, but at least the lath will be continuous behind it.
Right.
Right. I thought this was pretty cool. I'm glad Matt had a good answer. Like I said before, I think it's pretty tempting in all these situations, and I've thought about it in other situations to just cut a slot, rip off the top of the flashing and tuck it in there and caulk it. And you're like, well, how bad could this be? But chances are, if you're there to do this repair, it should be done right, because it's already been a problem once, and you're just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it at that point. So no, I don't think there's an easier way to do it, Chris. Sorry, I think you're gonna have to bust this sucker open. But did you check out that guy I just sent you a note about, Brian?
Not yet, but I did see your email.
Okay, yeah.
You found a video?
Well, I found a guy out in the Bay Area that has posted a lot of videos and done a lot of work with stucco and plastering. And I thought he might be a guy that we could lean on a little bit for some more content in that area.
A couple of new houses were built in my neighborhood recently that were finished with stucco, which was a surprise because it's not, not all that common around this area, and not common at all in the area, the town that I live in.
You see it every once in a while in New England.
Yeah.
I wonder if it makes sense.
Yeah,
because if
on all the straw bales.
I was gonna say,
gotta come back, bring it back to that.
Have you done a lot of stucco, Matt?
On one house, I did a lot of stucco, inside and out.
So how does it? So you do two coats, right? You were doing traditional.
Yeah. So we did
like
a scratch coat.
You didn't need lath, right? Because
not over most of it, just over framing members, essentially. Yeah.
So you do a scratch coat. And what is the idea behind the scratch coat and the finish coat? Why can't you just do one coat?
Do it all in one?
I mean, I know they have one coat systems, but
yeah,
and I've seen those recommended for patches.
Yeah,
but for like I said, I'm at the end of my knowledge here with stucco.
Yeah,
I would really like to be on a job where I could just see it done. There's so much you can absorb, I think, just by watching and asking questions.
Yeah,
and I just feel like the coverage of it in other publications and on video has not been. I don't know. It's just not as popular as, say, like everyone doing their version of how to frame a roof. Like you can find that content everywhere, but stucco seems to be a little bit more nuanced and a little bit less. Maybe it's just harder to teach, so they don't try to do articles and videos about it. But anyway, what do we got here? was absentmindedly scrolling down on my document and lost where I was. Jason writes to us, so about the time the podcast came out, I started my screen porch and deck project. I'm a weekend warrior at best, never had a paying job as a carpenter. But I wanted to bump up my tool count, and high in the list is a worm drive saw from the moment I got Larry Hahn's The Very Efficient Carpenter. Awesome book, by the way. We should see if we can get a deal on that in the Taunton store. Get a little discount off that book. That's an awesome book for people. I'm an East Coaster, Maine for the brownie points, and have always had sidewinders. I also got the Makita Hypoid saw from eBay for cheap, and I can't believe I waited so long. It's a little heavier, but it cuts so well and straight, and I can reach across and cut a piece of plywood from one side. I love having the blade on the correct side. I like that, the correct side. I like the top handle for carrying it. It plunges well, and bottom line, I'm a convert. I'm curious what you guys use, Sidewinder or worm drive?
I've got both. I probably got the same saw he got at Makita. I love it.
Yeah, I have both also.
I got both.
Man, look at us. I feel like, I wonder if that's a common thing or if we're...
So the question is, when do you pull out one versus the other?
Yeah.
Go.
Anytime I'm cutting PT, I'll use the worm drive.
Interesting.
Yeah,
but
not
not
power and stuff like that. Yeah, it just seems like it has a bit more guts.
Well, it does.
Yeah, but more and more it seems like I just go for the Milwaukee Fuel battery op saw for just about everything, because you can even cut LVLs with that thing. I mean, it's a little slower, but it's so nice and light, and you know, when you need something quickly, you don't want to have to worry about cords or anything like that. It's kind of my go-to now.
That's really interesting that we've seemed to have gotten to the point, at least in your opinion, that you don't even need a cord for your framing projects. You're going straight to the cordless.
Yeah, I think I have like 5 batteries. So I mean, I don't need to recharge during the day, or if I want to, I can. It doesn't take that much. The batteries charge so fast.
Yeah,
and I mean, you're going to make probably 100 cuts or more on a charge on a 5-amp battery. So
yeah,
it doesn't seem like there's a real need to go for the cord. So I mean, so you don't need to have the noisy generator. You don't have to have the smell, the noise, any of that stuff. You don't have to worry about making sure you have gas on the site.
Yeah,
about the the generator not starting. Because I mean, how often in the framing, when you're starting out, you're not going to have power on the project most of the time. So it's just one less thing to worry about.
Yeah. You can keep that gas for the burn barrel instead.
Yeah.
I guess maybe we should back up and actually explain what a Sidewinder and a worm drive are. It has to do with the gearing inside the saw. So a Sidewinder essentially has the blade coming straight off of the motor. So the motor spins, and it has a shaft coming off the motor that's attached to the blade. And so the blade tends to spin faster than on a worm drive, which is geared down. So let's say the blade on a Sidewinder, I think, is around 6,000 RPM or something. So it's fast. A worm drive, the motor is it's just rotated 90 degrees. So it's along the length of the body of the saw, but then it has a gear that turns it 90 degrees to where the blade sits. So it's geared down, which means it has more torque and it spins slower. It's also heavier and changes the weight. Changes the shape of the tool because of the fact that the blade, the motor is going the long direction. I like the worm drive, and I've spent a bunch of time using both, but I reach for the worm drive for most things now, as opposed to the Sidewinder. I just don't find that it's that easy to see let me just think here. The things that I like about the worm drive better. It's the blade is on the left, and I'm a right-handed guy, so I can see I can see the cut line. It's heavy, so I like to use its weight when possible. So, like, if I'm on a stack of lumber, or I'm often what I'll do is I'll have like a 2x up on my foot, and that way you can kind of line up the blade and just plunge straight down towards the ground for the cut, and just using the weight and gravity to make it easy and straight. It's got more torque, so more power, so it beasts its way through really hard cuts. And the extra long reach of it makes it really nice for ripping plywood because you can be on one side of the sheet
And reach across.
and reach all the way across. Yeah. That said, it's heavier, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of situations where I find that to be a huge problem.
The one issue that I have with it sometimes, I would say it's an issue when I first started using it. Because of that extra torque, that thing will spin a bit when you start it up. Like it just kind of like torques to the side.
Yeah.
And so you have to hold the blade back a decent amount from your cut so the thing doesn't like just jump into the piece and start to screw you up.
It kind of twists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was brushing up on the perks of the pros and cons before the show, and so I did a quick search, and I landed on a video about this, and I was like, oh, great. So I'll just watch this little video. It turns out it was me in the video. I have no recollection of doing this. And I was like, this is pretty good. So we'll put that up. It's funny.
Were you explaining the differences?
I was explaining. The whole video was about, it was a Toolhound video. Remember those, Brian?
Oh, yeah.
It was.
We just brought them back.
No, we didn't.
But now we call them Tool Tech.
Yeah. And they're Patrick instead of Justin.
And they're Patrick instead of Justin. But we've come back to a series on tools.
Yeah, it was a really thorough look at the pros and cons and a lot of B-roll footage of all the different cutting situations. And I was like, wow, this is pretty informative. I don't remember any of this stuff. It was like watching somebody else's program on something. It was weird. But anyway, but you didn't tell us, Brian, which one you...
I think I would agree with everything that you said about the worm drive, and those are the same kinds of reasons that I reach for it. Although you mentioned...
I forgot plunge cuts also. Plunge cuts for the worm drive. That's a huge one. Okay, go ahead.
Although you mentioned cutting the sheet of plywood and the reach, and while that makes sense, I tend to take out Sidewinder more when I am cutting a sheet of plywood or sheet goods or cuts that I think because of the weight, I feel like I have a little bit more control. If I'm making stop cuts for like a stringer or something, I tend to take out the circular saw instead of the Sidewinder.
You're losing me. Circular saw instead of the Sidewinder?
Yeah.
You mean the worm drive instead of the Sidewinder?
No, I tend to take out the circular saw.
They're all circular saws.
Okay, I call that
the skill saw?
Skill saw.
Sidewinder. That's the
Sidewinder.
Sidewinder.
Yeah,
Yes.
I tend to take out the Sidewinder for stop cuts, cutting sheets of plywood, things that I want a little more control.
Because it's lighter.
Because it's lighter. I feel like I control it a little better.
Yep, okay.
But if I'm cutting, framing a deck and just cutting, joist after joist after joist.
Yeah. Another thing
I'll take the Sidewinder all day.
Another place where that weight is handy is when you're cutting things to length in place. Like if you're up on the roof and you're trimming roof rafter plumb cuts, or you run your deck joists long and then you want to trim them off flush. It's nice to have it there.
I have the rigid, and I love it.
Yeah, you mentioned that before.
Yeah, I think it's just like I've mentioned before. Bless you. I think I've mentioned before that I really like rigid tools. I've got that. I've got a drill driver, and I've got a router, and I love them.
I have a Bosch, and the thing runs fantastic.
Yeah.
I beat the hell out of it. I don't even know. I don't even know if you can kill a worm drive saw. Does it ever wear out? It seems like they're just built to. I mean, people are still using the ones from like the 70s.
Well, I've never killed a Sidewinder, but I feel like this rigid worm drive that I have is a more durable tool. I have had a bunch of Sidewinders just sort of get to condition that they don't.
Right. Right, they kind of get grindy a little
bit. Yeah. The blade retraction stops working as well, and I haven't felt that with this rigid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Noticed that with this rigid tool.
Huh.
And the motor doesn't get in the way. That's one thing. With that fuel, sometimes that motor on the Sidewinder will get in the way, depending on what kind of like setup you got, I guess.
Yeah, if you're ripping with a straight edge, you get to your clamp.
Yeah, exactly. And that's been a problem a couple times.
Yeah, I've had that situation.
Yeah, if you're using like a shooting board, a shooting guide kind of a thing, where like a sheet of melamine you have to keep that little fence that you're riding against super low,
really low.
Otherwise.
Yeah,
because that motor goes almost all the way down to the shoe.
So what are the good things about a?
It's just light and easy to swing around, and you don't have to club it. You don't have to
club it.
You don't have to. I don't know. You don't have to plug it in, I think, is what I was
Yeah,
trying to
well,
get
I
to.
don't know that the weight
You
is.
just want it to be cordless. It doesn't matter what kind of saw it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think if my worm drive died, I would get that Makita battery op worm drive.
Well, they have a battery operated worm
Well,
drive.
it's not really a worm drive. It's worm drive style, so it's that inline style, but it's not technically. I think Patrick just actually did a video about this, didn't he?
I think so, yeah. It's sitting on his desk, I think.
There's a Tool Tech video about this. Speaking of Patrick and Tool Tech, I think. Oh yeah, Jeff shoots those. That's the other thing Jeff does.
He is multi-talented.
Yeah, he does two things.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have a microphone over there?
It's not.
Turn it on.
I can't without stopping the show.
Oh, I wanted to hear about your house.
Oh, no.
Oh boy! All right, maybe we'll have you on as a guest soon. We can talk some details about that. All right, let's wrap it up. If you have questions or topics you'd like to dive into, send us a note, fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram, where we got all sorts of daily content to feed your craving for building nerdiness. And finally, how are you not yet subscribed to the magazine? You can sign up for a 1-year subscription for $30 by going to findhomebuilding.com/pod offer. Definitely check it out. We put a lot of work into that magazine, and the answers will probably be a little more definitive than what you get here from us yammering on.
Surely.
So until next time, this is Justin for Brian and Matt saying keep craft alive and happy building.